Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are in the world. And welcome back to AFVRC for what is round 3 of the season. And tonight, we also have our first endurance round of the season. So not what you've seen in the past 2 weeks where we have two 20-minute sprint races, one 40-minute long feature race, but still with the same old 20-minute qualifying beforehand. My name is Max Ring. I'll be taking you through all the action this evening alongside Zabby. How are you, Zabby, on this Wednesday evening?
How are you? Thanks for having me, Max. I think it'll be interesting going into this one, a first endurance race of the season, and now it won't be the two sprint races, which could give driver multiple chances in case of you mess out race one, you've got one more race to go. But now, I think possibly in terms of racing, this might be on the calmer side since it's an endurance race, but still quite excited to see how this pans out in those 40 minutes.
Yeah, it certainly should be quite interesting indeed. Of course, we gotta remember. Of course, it's the perfect round to do an endurance race. We are here at Silverstone, of course, arguably the most famous circuit in the UK. Of course, hosts Formula One, has hosted the World's Endurance Championship, current host of European Le Mans Series as well. And it should be a rather interesting event where, of course, every mistake matters now, Zabby. As you said, they've not got that second chance. And over a 40-minute period, I think we're going to see drivers who haven't driven the car for this long start to make a few more mistakes the later we go on into the evening.
Certainly, and considering even last week we had two races, but we saw a lot of mistakes, even in those two races throughout qualifying and onto those races. So now it'll be interesting to know how they're going to pan out into a 40-minute one, a longer race, probably, as you said, a couple of more mistakes. So considering those were pretty much already there on a sprint weekend, so it'll be an interesting one to see how they do in this endurance one.
It certainly shall indeed. And as you can see, drivers making their way out onto the circuit to go into qualifying. They're starting their outlaps, but while they're doing that, let's head to the standings. Here is the pro category. It's Jack Goring who leads the way so far, from David Wrench in second, then Jack Trumwit in third, followed by Tom Stevens, Scott Darville, Toby Andrews, Ben Cullen, James King, Ethan Lee, and Adam Barron, rounding out the top 10 in that pro category. The rest of the field is Matthew Forrest in 11th. Will Fuchs, who of course started the season off strongly with the opening two races of the season, didn't attend last week. He's in 12th. Then it's Darren Berris, Chris Pooley, Matt Chambers, Chris Boland, Pete Plasto, Brad Kropp, Chris Slater, and Ryan Blackwell with the 20 cars. And then rounding off the rest of the pro category, it's Dan Cross, Jonathan Murphy, Stuart Eacock, and John Finch, who are round off the pro category. And in the amateur standings, we have Bailey Vernon Higgs, Craig Ledoux, Joshua Lindsay, Scott Eastwood, Ryan Worley, Tom Bunton, Glenn Burry, Gray, Ben Weston, and Colin Scott in that top 10. And of course, Bailey Vernon Higgs has done some superb drives this season, and the rest of the amateur standings is Mark Gladwell, Adrian Warmington, Neil Jack, Robert Cross, and Tim Hastings. Those last two have not scored any points yet, but the drivers are making their way around the circuit now. Zabby, qualifying is going to be well and truly underway in a few moments' time, and at a circuit like Silverstone, I would say, compared to other circuits potentially on the calendar, qualifying not too important. Plenty an overtaking opportunity, as we're seeing actually here in qualifying, some overtakes already.
Yeah, they're already happening in this qualifying and already getting into that rhythm of racing maybe. So yeah, surely I think qualifying to some extent it would be important, but as you said, maybe not as important as it would be on some other parts around the calendar we'd go to. So definitely I think a lot of overtaking opportunities, quite not really easy, but an easy enough circuit to really make those overtakes, as we have track map now, seeing those cars all together, almost bunched up, one after the other here in this qualifying session, and we're only 3 minutes in out of those 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm surprised we aren't seeing drivers actually just somewhat back off a little bit, find some room onto the circuit. They're all somewhat in the same herd, but of course they are still warming up those tyres, starting to figure out where the track grip is. So maybe even just getting a little bit of running behind cars in front of you, just give you a little bit of extra knowledge heading into that longer race and to deal with that traffic management. Of course, we are looking at the Pro Championship leader, Jack Goring, as he makes his way now up into Copse Corner. And with plenty of the session to go, these drivers will be fueled for multiple runs on this set of tyre until they'll have to come into pit lane. And with Silverstone as well here, Zabby, it is quite a long pit lane. Of course, you do cut off that final corner. Let's look at Goring all over the back there of the car in front of him, nearly into the back of the silver machine in front. But it shows Jack is really confident at the moment. I think he was one of the quickest in practice, of course, around about that 2-minute mark. The top AM driver was at a 2-minute 1 mark, so they're quite close between the two categories. And he goes to the inside there into Stowe. Lovely stuff, getting those overtake practices in early.
Yeah, definitely, and I think overtake on crop, I believe that was from Jack Goring, and already, as you said, he's really feeling that confidence and definitely throwing his car in at all times in corners as he's feeling that through. And as you said, the pit lane quite longer around here, so possibly just drivers. I think it's the case of, do they have that in mind or do they don't, in terms of when they come on and into the pits and make a pit stop? Do they want to cover that up out on the track and maybe go a little bit faster, or maybe not? What would their really initial thinking be, as we already have drivers coming over the line and setting up some lap times out there on the track?
Yeah, we certainly do indeed. So far, 4, or make that 5 of the pro runners and then 3 of the AM drivers so far. It's Ethan Lee setting the early pace as we now head around the final corner with Darren Barris, whereas his lap time going to put him, it's going to put him 5th fastest in that pro category. Nicely done indeed from the number 40. Instantly displaced slow by Mark Gladwell from the AM category. Of course, if you are new here, it's the pros in the green next to their name, and it is the AMs with the pink next to their name and, of course, driver number. But for Mark Gladwell, out-qualifying some pros already and top of his class indeed. Certainly starting his session off strongly, Zabby.
Yeah, he definitely is. I mean, even in practice times, we saw earlier that he was doing quite nice times as compared to, you know, his amateur category, and definitely he's already looking quite strong in terms of how he wants to be, quite and strong lap time in his category, but then also catching up to those pro category drivers as well. So definitely he's really driving his car almost out of what he can do, really pushing that machine to as much as he can, really. In these times, as we have currently Craig out in front of our screens, making their way through. Meggetts and Beckett's now here on the qualifying lap, just getting through, smoothing those corners onto the curb in 3rd gear, back on power. Pretty much you stay on power all the time into Meggetts and Beckett's, but just back out into 5th and 6th. While we have a couple of more drivers putting up times in the pro category as well, I believe. So there's quite a lot of shuffling in those grid times, and it goes Toby Andrews into the fastest time of the session, 201.8, I believe that is. Top of the timing charts in the pro category so far.
Yeah, nicely done there from Toby Andrews as Ryan Worley goes to the top of the amateur category as well. Currently on board with amateur category, of course, co-driver Craig Ledoux. Across the line he'll come, whereas this lap time going to put the number 13. No time on the board just yet, potentially has just invalidated that run by going off the circuit. And for Toby Andrews, as you mentioned, a very nice lap time indeed. Instantly followed was Jack Goring. So we're now on board with Gray heading through the final couple of corners. Also in the amateur category, can he maybe displace Ryan Worley's lap time across the line? We shall go. What's this going to be for the number 88? And another driver who has unfortunately made a mistake on their lap and has not kept it valid. And of course, that's the issue here with Silverstone as well, is that some of the corners you're on the the knife's edge of track limits. You're pushing all the way to that white line here, Zabby, and it's very easy just to understeer that little bit wide, of course, not with much downforce on these machines, and pick up those track limit invalidations.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something they'd have to look out on, especially in qualifying, where you're trying to get the most of it, but then also staying within the white lines. It could get sometimes tricky if you're unable to get a lap in. It could bite you really to really have you be at the bottom. Obviously, I think in qualifying they could say, okay, as we talked about, qualifying maybe not as important as Adam Barron slightly takes a sausage curve there, goes in the air. But even in the race, it'll more be the case, if there is any track limit penalties awarded for their mistakes or them going wide, as Jack Goring now goes top of the time in charts, 201.614. They're already flying here in this qualifying session with about 11 minutes to go.
Yeah, nicely done there from Jack Goring, but of course these times will constantly tumble as drivers get more and more confident in their machines. They start to find little tips and tricks around the circuit and places where they can maybe brake later, get on the power earlier, and just find more and more lap time in the lap. Ledoux now coming up to the line. Has he kept this one valid this time around? No, another mistake from the number. Actually, no, does go to the top of the times in the amateur category. Craig Ledoux to the very top. And that is nicely done indeed in front of Scott Eastwood, who did, of course, take that top spot. Gray now coming through the final quarter, of course. He also invalidated his previous attempt. What's this going to be for the 88? It's third fastest for Gray. Nicely done indeed, to put him onto the second row of that amateur category. And for David Wrench, of course, second in the pro standings. Not setting a lap time on the board just yet. This is going to be a crucial lap here, Zabby, to set a lap on the board if he wants to take the fight to Jack Goring as this season progresses.
Yeah, he definitely has to be. I mean, I think we've seen a couple of drivers maybe invalidating a couple of times, but I think now David Wrench would have his time as Brad Kropp currently behind them on a flying lap as well. They've got a car in front, a couple of cars in front of them, but it'll be interesting to see how good can Brad Kropp do there out on this lap over the line. How fast will this be for car number 321 in the pro category, and over the finish line that should be for Brad Kropp? How fast do they go? And that is going to be a I can't quite see, and I think that's going to be P5. No, in fact, P6, that's going to be, apologies about that. And Jack Goring, I think, goes even faster, so those times are indeed going quite faster, as David Ranch posts up a time and goes up to P2 as well. So already he's taking that times. David Ranch already catching up to Jack Goring there.
Yeah, nicely done indeed, as we just saw Chris Boland go up into fourth place as well. Ben Cullen instantly moving himself up into fifth. But yeah, for Jack Goring and David Wrench, of course, at this mid-stage of qualifying, you do want at least some lap on the board to have a little bit of a delta, to know what you're pushing up against and know where you're finding time or potentially where you're losing it for the rest of the session to potentially adapt. So very nicely done indeed by both Kropp and Wrench there, to be able to get onto the times and at least have something to look at over the course of the session. Now looking at Plastow as he now makes his way down the Wellington Straight into Brooklands Corner. We'll see what he is going to be able to do. Currently 11th fastest in that pro category. It'll be interesting to see, as actually Gray's gone to the top of the amateur category, how the pros and the AMs intertwine into one another on the pecking order. Are there any of the amateurs actually out qualifying some of the pro drivers? Plastow now heading up into Copse Corner, and Gray is the highest, of course, and he's actually 13th overall in his amateur machine. So that's very nice stuff indeed from the 88 runner. Of course, that's the good thing as well here, Zabby. Even though we have the pros and the AMs, they're quite evenly matched in the sense that the quickest amateur driver can still hang it with those pro runners and potentially even score a few top 10s, or if luck goes their way, potentially even a one-off top 5 later on in the season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sure, although they could be in different categories, but as you already see, those amateur drivers being in the mix of AM Pro category drivers. So definitely, it's a case of where it's almost quite really close. So even though you're going to be in that amateur category, but you'd always have a chance, or at least you'd know in the back of your mind that you've got a chance. If you could do good enough, you can definitely go into those pro category cars, and that would be a nice feat and a nice let's say a nice delta and a time to look at for yourselves and an achievement kind of a thing, you know, knowing that you have got the speed and you're definitely, you know, going to be, if it's a case of where you're going to be in your amateur category, but then, oh, sorry, in the pro category, within the pro category drivers, but you'd also know that you'd pretty much be the better driver, or let's say the fastest in your amateur category.
Yeah, it's certainly nice to look at, seeing that you're faster than some of the pros. Currently now looking at Chris Pauley as he makes his way through Maggots, Beckett's, and now through Chapel. Of course, ninth fastest so far in the pro categories for the #1 car, as he now makes his way down the hangar straight into, of course, Stowe Corner, one of the final corners on this circuit. Heavy on the brakes, down to third gear, roll the car through the corner, and then straight back on to the power as you then make your way into the Vale chicane. Easy to lock up the front brakes into this corner and maybe just run a little bit wide. We've seen some of the drivers run a little bit too far wide and hit that sausage curb, but for Paulie, a very nice final sector, a bit of a slide through club, and a big off for Chris Paulie. A slide through club, overcorrects it, and he puts it straight into the kitty litter. And for Paulie, that's really unfortunate indeed, as Jack Goring goes even faster.
Jack Goring putting those times in as we're on board with Ryan Burley, currently watching car number 30 on the track, making their way through the last couple of corners into Stowe Corner. They'll go, and definitely that's what can happen if you slightly overcorrect, slightly overdo it. That could bite you, and it would give you slightly bit of mistakes. And this is the final corner it was for that car earlier we saw, and they lost her on their own. But what about Ryan Burley now into those final couple of corners? They've got the chance back on power, still staying on power there on the exit over to the line. They go quite wide, but how good of a lap is that going to be? Do they go any better in this amateur category? And I don't think so if they go anywhere better, so possibly either an invalidation or they're going to go again.
I think that really was an invalidation potentially on the exit as Stowe ran a little bit too far wide, and we know the iRacing track limits, they are very harsh indeed. And of course, for that mistake there for Chris Pauley, that really shows how much the weight distribution really affects the car. Of course, if you correct too early, or if you put too much rotation into the car, it gets so unbalanced that it becomes unsavable, and you see yourself just having those moments. You have that spin, or you potentially just go too deep into a corner if you brake too late, because, of course, as all the weight shifts to the front of the car, it's more easy to lock up that front brake, or even if you just brake that little bit too early or too harshly, all the weight then shifts to the rear. So it's very easy to make the mistakes in these types of car with no ABS and no traction control. So it is certainly a car that does punish when mistakes are made, as Adam Barron jumps straight over that first sausage curb there at the Vale chicane, and same again on the exit of the corner. Currently 13th fastest. Where is the number 5 machine going to go after this one? Is it going to be an improvement here from Barron? No, it does not seem so. Looking to go again. 3 minutes remaining in the session here, Zabby, so we are getting to crunch time as Craig the Jew makes his way through Stowe and Mark Lordwell makes his way through Copse Corner.
Yeah, currently we're seeing a lot of cars now going through. Matt Gladwell going through Maggots and Beckett's now. And I think that's just the uncertainty of these cars in terms of weight distribution and how you want to take them through a couple of corners. Especially, you know, drivers have had a few laps of practice, or let's say a couple of minutes of it, but still quite unsure how much they want to put into a certain corner, into a certain braking zone there, as Mark Gladwell currently making their way through Store corner, going through in third and fourth gear now in that amateur category. How good is this a lap going to be? Currently fourth fastest in the amateur category. Mark Gladwell was going quite quick in that practice session. Is that going to twitch up and transfer to qualifying? Is this lap going to be good enough to get himself to the top three? Yes, it is, and just good enough for a P3 there from Mark Gladwell. So just slightly down from the top in his category, as we have Pete Plastor in P12 in the pro category so far. Is there an improvement for them right here? It doesn't seem to be. So either they're going again or an invalidation there could have been. There's only minutes and 40 seconds now remain in the qualifying session. So for all those drivers out on the track, it is now or never.
It certainly is now or never. This is your final opportunity if you are just crossing the line. Now, we do see some drivers heading into the pit lane there on the track map. Plenty of drivers actually heading off into the pits. So are we going to see too many changes in this final part of the session, or is everyone used the best of their tyre? As we're now, of course, heading through Luffield corner with Plastow. Is he going to do anything here? Runs wide, of course, on the exit of Luffield to extend as much as he can, get the power down as soon as possible, and get as much momentum up into Copse corner. Of course, in an F1 car, this would be flat. In a Porsche Cup car, you need to use your brakes and head down to fourth gear and roll the car through. Takes a little bit too much of the inside apex curb, I would think, before he now makes his way into the probably most iconic parts of this circuit, Maggots, Beckett's, and then into Chapel corner, down to third gear, just lets off the throttle completely and rolls the car through. Then it goes all the way to the left-hand side through Chapel, and then brings the car back out to the right as we head down now the Hanger Straight. So far it's Goring and Gray topping in their retrospective categories, and now for Plastow as he makes his way through Stowe corner, a little bit wider from the apex than what he would have wanted. Keeps the car within play though on the exit of the corner, does not elect to come into pit lane, so I'm assuming he is still finding time and pushing on this lap. Qualifying is now complete. The checkered flag is out, so any time now will be your final time. So for Plastow, what's it going to be as he heads up to the line through the final corner? Across the line he goes now. Of course, was 12th fastest. It's 7th fastest for Pete Plastow. A big improvement there, and nicely done indeed.
Yeah, surely is. Pete finding that time as we now see Mark Gladwell, and it's going to be David Ranch in the pro category. So far, slightly did he go wide on the exit of Stowe there into the chicane and the last couple of corners. This could be interesting right here as qualifying is now over. If you go over the line, it'll be the checkered flag. David Ranch, can he go top of the timing chart and ahead of Jake Goring up over the line? How fast is it? And no, should have been either an invalidation or they could not find an improvement, as we see Adam Barron now coming into the pit lane, I believe, is qualifying pretty much now over, unless there's cars out on the track still trying to come and complete their laps.
Don't think there is at this moment in time. So at the moment, it does look like Gray and Goring are going to be top of their respective categories, unless Ethan Lee has anything to say in this session. Ben Weston has been, unfortunately, black flagged from the session. But for Ethan Lee, of course, set the early pace with that opening lap. Can he, from 11th fastest, potentially find an improvement? No, comes into the pit lane. So all eyes now turn to Mark Gladwell as he's head through the final corner, the final driver on the circuit. And is this going to be enough for Mark to see himself to the top spot? Runs wide through Stowe, but keeps his foot in it, and will now just make his way through the Vale chicane, hold his nerve, but no, goes deep. That's lap over, and that's going to be qualifying over. And with that, it is going to be Jack Goring on the pro pole position. But let's run you through your grid for this evening's endurance race. It's Goring on pole from David Wrench in second. On the second row of the grid, it's Andrews and Boland before Ben Cullen and Matthew Forrest round out row 3. Next, we have in row 4, Pete Plastow in 7th, Brad Kopp in 8th, Tom Stevens 9th, and Chris Prawley in 10th on row 5. And in row 6, we have Ethan Lee and Stuart Etok. Row 7, we have Adam Barron, and our first of the amateur drivers with Gray. And then on row number 8, we have a double amateur lineup of Ledoux and Gladwell. Before on row 9, we have Ryan Blackwell and Scott Eastwood in 17th and 18th. Row 10, we have Ryan Worley and Joshua Lindsay, followed by Ben Weston and Chris Slater, and then Darren Barris and Colin Scott round out row 12. Currently a 2-minute 5.1 for Scott, and that is the grid order. 24 drivers here this evening, Zabby. A 40-minute sprint endurance race, should I say, not sprint race. And it should be rather interesting to see how these drivers, for the first time this season, cope with the longer format.
Yeah, it definitely should be. I'm in the top two, Jack Goring and David Wrench, only separated by 2 tenths there. And I think it'll definitely be quite interesting. Also seeing both category cars mixed up, although at the back of the grid, but still being closer in time. So definitely that racing, and I think will-to-will action would still be there, even though it's a 40-minute endurance race, as we are just getting cars out on the track and should be getting started within a couple of moments.
Yeah, of course, we are just waiting for the drivers to grid up, and for Jack Goring and David Wrench, the top 2 in the standings. They are very much looking to capitalise on a race like this, but of course, with it being longer, mistakes can be made, and of course, it means that they have to cope with the tyre wear as well. So for Goring, he needs a good launch from pole position. Of course, we've seen some drivers who've started on pole potentially just bog down at the very start and get a little bit too much wheel spin. Very difficult with no traction control to get the car off the line. But when will we be getting underway? Goring on that pole, Wrench on the front row alongside him. 40 minutes of action are upon us, and we're underway, and it's a horrible start from Jack Goring, and David Wrench capitalises immediately, taking that race lead away as we're underway here in Silverstone, and Goring has dropped all the way down to 5th place currently. He's going to try and fight his way back on the inside. He is now up into 4th place, but Wrench has immediate capitalised onto that one. We're 2 by 2 in the background, 3 wide, as we actually have a spinner there on the exit of Farm Corner, and of course we're still 3 wide in that mid-pack. As for Jack Goring, he has had a terrible start from pole position. Oh, that's Ledoux. Oh, and it's a big incident on the exit on the loop. Ledoux involved. Couldn't see who else was potentially involved in that accident. Potentially Gladwell as well. And also Scott Eastwood potentially involved in that scuffle. But for David Wrench here, Zabby, a dream start as his championship rival. And that's Toby Andrews round on the exit of Luffield. He has gone round as well in the number 11 machine. It's seeming to be a tricky opening lap on cold tyres.
It really is, and I think it's all happening right here already. Still there's racing out between these drivers. Side-by-side actions going on, while I think Jack Goring's lost out to David Wrench there. David's going to be happy about that, but at the amount of incidents and spins we've seen from these cars, Jack Goring would quite be happy to be in that P3 position, as we currently see Toby Andrews in P12, who now goes up to P11, I believe, as there's another car at the back who's lost out their positions, as we're now watching a blue-orange stripe Porsche making their way around the circuit, making their way through. So now, interestingly, I think we've had a lot of, even though we're just 2 minutes in a 40-minute race, those actions, and I think chaos is not stopping at all.
Yeah, it certainly is not, and that opening lap was very frantic indeed, as we got a replay of that opening lap skirmish. It was Ethan Lee who went around, and then in the background there was, I think, about 6 cars in avoidance, all came together at once. Of course, here's Craig Ledoux on the inside, just gets collected there, and then of course then 3 other cars trying to make their way through in a very tight gap, and it was never going to work out indeed. So we're now seeing what happened in the actually Vale, the corner before that was Plastow, who went around there. Unfortunately for the 3-1-2, he had a good qualifying, but it's gone to nothing on the opening lap. Plenty of mistakes did happen there, plenty of action, And for these drivers, they've got to find themselves into a rhythm. And the big winner out of all of this, out of all that carnage, is Gray. He's well clear of the, actually no, he's not well clear of Mark Goldwell, but he is clear of the rest of the AMPAC, and he's up into 10th place overall.
Yeah, it really is, and I think it was all happening. It was also the case of you yourself that are going okay, as there's another car one more time. There's a driver spinning around, as I think we see Craig, or it is Toby Andrews, I believe, spinning around once again. So mistakes keep coming on for Toby there, possibly trying to recover from their mistake earlier, but again, in that pressure, losing out a little as we have a bit of a fight between these cars up at the front. It is Ben Cullen and Chris Bolland, I believe, for P3, and for other it is Jack Goring in P2, who's got Chris behind him to defend from. Could he quite do it though? Currently at the moment 3.9 tenths separating the two drivers. Is there going to be a chance for David Wrench and Jack Goring, or allow these guys? I think Jack Goring is just about safe from Chris Bolland there into store. Maybe you would have thought there's going to be a chance, but really not close enough. But I think what is close in this one is the top three within a second of each other. So that top three is going to be in for a fight in these minutes going into this race now.
Yeah, of course, even though it is the start of what is a very long 40-minute race, they are still crucial opening laps to just find your feet and get into position. Goring sets the fastest lap on that second tour, and David Wrench might start to come under some pressure. It's been a good recovery from Goring in the first two skirmishes, and he's now going to be trying to hunt down his championship rival at the top of the standings. Of course, we're now looking at Chris Pooley as he's trying to put Ben Cullen under some pressure for 4th place in this race, as we just head out of Aintree and down the Wellington Straight before Brooklands. Of course, this next complex of corners has not been too well for Toby Andrews, who's now a little bit further back. So it'll be interesting to see how he now takes lap 3, maybe 3rd time is the charm through Brooklands and Luffield for the number 11 machine. Brad Kropp trying to make his way through here onto Tom Stevens as they head through Luffield. Nothing working there, but a good exit could give him the run up into Kopp's corner. But for Kropp, just a little bit of a slide on the exit of Luffield means that Stevens is able to hold on to that position. But the 3-2-1 certainly putting the 89 under some big pressure here, Zabby.
Yeah, really. I mean, that racing's happening still, and 3-2-1 number car is still staying ahead of those cars behind, and definitely keeping that in control, at least for the moment, as they make their way through into Maggots and then Beckett, I believe. Well, we're about 15 minutes in, or almost, no, in fact, 6 minutes in this race now, but still, I think it's the case of now the race is moving towards a calmer side, or is it, though, as there might be something at the front of the field, or unless we've not got to, oh, that is indeed Jack Goring and David Wrench going for it as Jack Goring round the outside takes the lead, or does he though, because David Wrench now will have the outside line. Jack will have the inside. Who's going to go better into the chicane? It'll be Jack Goring. David might come around the outside, while we have Chris Bolland behind them in P3 waiting on the side to squeeze through. Can he though, because Jack Goring now has made the move and taken the lead ahead of David Wrench. Has Jack Goring is now Chris Bolland might come back at the behind to try and have a go on David Wrench there. Is there going to be a chance for a Chris Bolland there? Has he had his car on the inside? For a moment you've thought he's going to move to the inside or move his car to the side to have a chance, but I think already you could see now it's a case for David Wrench. Either he tries to take back his lead or defends his 2nd place from Chris Bolland there.
It could be attack is the best form of defence, and he's all over the back of Jack Goring as we head down into Brooklyn. Slipstream seems to be very powerful here this evening. It's there to the inside. Will go David Wrench. He's got a 4 scoring to go a little bit wider than he would like on the Brooklyn's exit. Narrow his line through Luffield, and then for David Wrench to just power around the outside. This will be a spectacular move from the number 32 as they're still side by side on the exit of the corners. We head through Woodcote, and it is going to be David Wrench who retakes that race lead. Boyland still just looking in the background, trying to lurk and find any opportunity to even make his way up into second, nearly into the back there of Jack Goring as we head through Copse Corner and now into Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. This could be a crucial moment in the race, and for Jack Goring, if he can get another sublime exit out of here, he could certainly challenge into Stowe Corner once more. Of course, Boland is still potentially in this fight. He's still in the hunt, but will Goring just have enough slipstream? He's got a nice exit once again. Look at Wrench defending that inside line. He's all the way over on the inside, and actually a little bit of bum drafting here from Jack Goring, but just can't be able to get through, and he's just going to have to sit behind us. Boland looks to the inside, potentially some slight contact made. Goring sent wide, and I think Boland sent into a spin. Boland has been sent into a spin, and Chris Boland, what was a great start to the race, has unfortunately been sent spinning after a spin that unfortunately was after this little bit of contact. Chris Boland, really unfortunate there. Went a little bit too hot on the brakes, and into the back of Goring he went.
Yeah, he did there, and I think it's a case of risk versus reward, trying to take that risk, maybe a bit on the inside of Goring, trying to get squeezed through if he could, but it wasn't to be, as they've now into P9, I believe Chris Boland dropped down to, but the top two are still going at it, while there is Ben Cullen behind arriving, along with Chris Pawley in P4 around behind the top two, while Jack Goring and David Ranch are still going to be going for it. Jack Goring currently in P2, with P3 in amateur is currently Scott, I believe so, and Ryan Burley in P4, so there's a bit of a fight in the amateur category as well, so it's all happening either in the pro or the AM category, and Ryan Burley currently in P4, just behind Scott there, I believe. Is there going to be a chance? I saw one of the cars going on the inside of one or the other up at the front, but it is going to be Scott currently running in P3, just behind Mark Gladwell, I believe, and Gray in P1 of this amateur category, while Toby Andrews is down in P15 in this pro category, along with Ryan Blackwell in P12. So there's interesting bit of fighting between the two category drivers there. So mixed up of cars, possibly been potentially fighting for an overall position in the race.
Yeah, it certainly is, and a complete mix of AMs and pros. Be interested to see where this all stacks out, as Gladwell has been able to get past Gray for that AM race lead. I think that was someone going straight off the road. I think Gray's gone off the road. Something has happened to Gray, and I think has come back into pit lane. So for the race leader in the AM category, Gray making a mistake and gets towed to the pit lane, so potentially has gone off somewhere and gone straight into the wall. This is on board now with Gray. What has happened? Maybe a bit too much of the curb there through Maggots. Oh, and straight off into the wall. A big accident for Gray, and that has taken Gray out of the race and out of any contention here. And for David Wrench at the front of the field, he's still pushing on nicely. Now with Chris Slater trying to go around the outside here. Oh, a big slide for him, and he went off as well into the exact same wall as Gray, and that was another tow to the pit lane. So two drivers making very similar mistakes. Here's Abby showing how much this circuit can bite, as Jack Goring has got back past on David Wrench as the number 32 tries to fight back into Brooklands.
Yeah, it's all happening here. I think it's just that sausage curb into that same corner. We saw two cars just taking a little bit more of it, and that's going to throw your car out of control, and pretty much you've just got to be a passenger and see where it throws. And unfortunately for those two, it was the wall they had to make contact with. Now forget about the top two. There is Ben Cullen behind in P3, I believe, reaching out as well. So this might turn a three-way fight for the race lead, as it is David Ranch in P2 behind Jack Goring, ahead of Ben Cullen. Ben is quite close. Up into Maggots we go. Is there going to be a chance? In fact, no, he's not quite further away for him to be going for a move. While Jack Goring still in the lead, about 4 tenths, 3.5 tenths separating the two drivers right there. Is there going to be a chance for up on the exit of Beckett's there? Is there going to be a chance for David Wrench now into Stowe Corner, while we see Ben right behind being the waiting duck, just like Chris Boland was in the fight earlier, but he is not really going to go for it. Will David Wrench there, and I think one of the drivers is now out of the pit lane or into the pit lane there, as it is Gray now out of the pit lane, I believe. So now just making those repairs quite quick in terms of the damage they had, but now back out on the track once again.
Yes, so for Gray, able to get back out onto the road, so we'll still be able to score some points in the amateur category. But yeah, very interesting to see indeed to see him out so soon, as that's Toby Andrews coming under a little bit of pressure here. And we'll see what is going to happen over this little squabble, of course, in the background, as we see Darren Berris make the attack onto Toby Andrews. Of course, this is over 13th in the pro category. Of course, Andrews at one stage was in third on that opening lap, but then spun off at Luffield, then spun again at Brooklands Corner, and has lost a lot of time indeed. And it certainly has been a opening start to the race to forget. But if anything happens, like we've just seen with the likes of Gray later on in the race, he could potentially still claw his way back into that top 10. And as we head to David Wrench and Jack Goring's battle, who's going to come out on top in this one? Look how close Wrench is once more. Cullen, of course, was really close to the back of Wrench. They've started to drop him ever so slightly. Could we see potentially, Sabby, at this current stage, Wrench and Goring work together, not attack one another, to just pull away from third place and fourth place of Cullen and Pooley, and just give themselves a nice buffer to then battle into?
It has to be. I mean, at the moment, if they are going to keep doing this, keep fighting each other, it could possibly become against one or the other driver at this moment, because, you know, mistakes could happen. A slight bit of touching or contact between the top two could send either one or both the drivers to the back, or that could easily then allow the likes of Ben Culling, while there's a bit of a fight at the other parts of the grid, I believe. That is Matthew Forrest in P8 and Adam Burren in P7. Adam's going to go around the outside, while Matthew in P8, there's going to be a bit of a fight in between those two drivers. As so interestingly, there's not only fights for that between that top two, there is quite a bit of scrap for racing and positions in the top, or let's say the bottom of the last couple of top 10 positions then, as Matthew Forrest in P8 with Adam Burren in P7, while I believe one of the drivers is into the pits, and that might be Darren Burris then in P14, making their way into the pit lane there. So pit stops are now arriving with about 25 minutes still remaining in the race.
Yes, first pit stop is then for Barris. How will the strategies, of course, work out in this one? Worley is actually, no, sorry, that's Stuart Etok putting Worley under some pressure here. This is over 14, well, of course, 13th place overall. And for Etok, he's currently 14th in that pro category. Ryan Worley is in third currently as well. So as we make our way onto the brakes into Brooklands, we'll see what we can see between these two, as that's a little bit further back. Ben Weston making his way through up into 5th place in his category, just getting past there on Colin Scott, who made a moment and had a little mistake out of the loop, and that's allowed Weston up into the top 5 now in the AM category. And it's gone a little bit wide through Luffield, and you can see how many drivers have gone a little bit too far wide through Luffield, as Andrews makes his way through there and up into another position. The number 11 makes his way through quite nicely, and he's slowly climbing further and further up. That was, of course, going against, actually, I think one of the lapped cars in this race. And now as we look at Barron try and get closer to Brad Kropp in front, this is over 6th place in this race. 3/10 is currently that margin as we head out of the final corner and down the main straight. Will Barron get close enough for a lunge, potentially into Village?
Yeah, really, I think a chance for a move up here could come up for Baron there in P7. Could have a chance on Crop in P6. They're quite close with another car behind them arriving at the scene, as well as nearly Adam Baron. For a moment, you would have thought he's going to be through as he runs a little bit wide, and that's going to allow Matthew Forrest to get through, and Matthew will get past Adam Baron and up to P7 as Adam, we saw, ran just a little bit wide into that left-hander, and he's going to have to lose out to Matthew Forrest as at the end of the straight into Brooklands, I believe it'll be in the left-hander before the next couple of corners, and that is the price you have to pay. Just slight bit of out of focus, and that is going to be a position lost for you. So a lot's happening, and I think also on the point of pit stops coming up here, Max, especially drivers quite close to each other. Let's say the top two, or any drivers who are quite close to each other in terms of speed, as is fighting at the front of the field as we do go back to the top. Just 3 tenths separating these two, and this could get interesting with David Wrench arriving. So I was about to say that in a situation like this, how do you outrun the other driver? Is it going to be, in terms of strategy in the pits, is it going to be the tyres you're going to outrun the other driver? Is it going to be the fuel that you're going to outrun the other driver in terms of creating a chance for you to come out on the top in the second half of the race, as we're nearly over the first half, as for a moment I thought one of them is going to come into the pits, but isn't to be. Well, the top two are still scraping through, just a few tenths ahead of Ben Cullen in P3, Jack Goring and David Wrench still at it.
Yeah, they are certainly still at this squabble. It's just Wrench not being able to get close enough to have a lunge on the brakes against Jack Goring, but they are pulling away from Cullen behind, and that's exactly what they need to do. And of course, as we now look how things does look overall, Mark Gladwell, of course, in 11th place, the highest of the AM drivers, leading that charge. And he is quite some way clear of Scott Eastwood, has plenty of pro drivers in between him and the Splan second place in the, of course, AM category. And for Goring, he is still just holding on to this race lead. Cullen and Paulie certainly starting to pull away. Cullen has not dropped off as much as Paulie, who's just not been able to have the pace of this top three for now as we exit out of Love Field. Is this Wrench just getting close for an opportunity, potentially into Cop's Corner, or even a move into Maggots? It's for two very risky places if you're going to go try for an overtake here. Did look to the inside line, just backed out of things. And as we look a little bit further back, it's Toby Andrews now squabbling away here with Blackwell over that 12th place in the overall standings. And of course, this will be 11th place in class. They're still battling on. And at the front of the field once more, it's still that 3 tenths buffer. It just seems out of Beckett's and Chapel here, Zabby. Goring just gets such a good drive that Wrench can't get close enough.
Yeah, really. I think it always has to be, one of those corners where the driver in front gets a slight bit of a better exit, or let's say a bit of more speed than the one behind, and then it kind of undoes the progress that they've made at the previous corners. Still quite close, as you'd see them getting closer, 3.5 tenths, almost sometimes even 2 tenths separating the two drivers. But then there comes a corner, or let's say, there comes a time where again the driver in front slightly gains, or the one behind quite loses a bit, which helps them stay ahead. Well, already we could see them gaining over 5 tenths.
Yeah, exactly. They're just really, really good through the heavy braking zones and getting the exit down. Goring, of course, the championship leader. This is the top two in the pro standings, just battling it out. Jack Goring was 200ths faster on the fastest lap on that previous tour. And now, as we get into that slipstream, Wrench just pulling out of the slipstream, just doesn't want to get too close under braking into Brooklands. Is this to set himself up out of Luffield Corner just to get the exit he needs out of this next long right hand? You can see he takes a bit of a wider line in his number 32 Porsche, and then just puts his foot to the floor. 2 tenths is that gap in the slipstream. That gap will be coming down, down, down. But again, just pulls out of the slipstream. I just don't think he's he wants to go for a move yet. Of course, we're halfway through this race now. There's still another half to go. Unless he has a clear-cut opportunity, I think Wrench is just very happy to sit behind Goring at this stage.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I'm surely it's the statement, as you said, makes sense here because just about 18 minutes now remaining, so pretty much the second half of the race still remains, and it's kind of helping them possibly not kind of fully run away from Cullen, but still create a slight bit of a gap as we have a crash of one of the drivers as they just lose it on their own. So pretty much just on the exit, losing it and slightly going wide. So quite away from the barriers and walls, but still Eastwood there losing quite a bit of progress so far right there currently as we have one of the drivers now coming into the pit lane as we have another replay seeing as we're now back on live. David Wrench now into the pits, so a pit stop from the drivers in the top comes through just about now.
Yes, this is crucial moments in this race with Wrench coming into the pit lane. Cullen set the fastest lap on that previous tour, and that now puts Jack Goring under a little bit of pressure as look how close he's got to the back to the 108. So with Wrench coming into the pit lane, that's unleashed the 909, and he can now potentially start to apply some really fierce pressure onto the car in front, or potentially even Goring making a mistake, because on that last lap, Cullen was only 700ths quicker. So as we make our way into Brooklyn, Paulie has dropped off the back of this lovely chrome blue machine, and for Jack Goring, the championship leader, he needs to have a response here to Cullen's pace. But look at that, nearly an overlap into Luffield corner, potentially nearly causing some accidents, some incidents between the pair. And now for Goring, this is where he excels the most. It's through this middle sector. It's through Copse Corner, Maggots, Beckett's and Luffield, where he's just so strong. And for Goring, he's now going to just try and extend that gap into a touching distance like we saw of Wrench, where the driver behind just can't get close enough for an attack.
Yeah, not right now. I think he seems to be quite quick and fast through that part of the track, but especially I think now, Ben Cullen in P2 is slightly dropped down to Goring now, but we've seen him getting closer as, interestingly, he might be, one of those, smartest of moves there, staying away from the top two, but then now when David is out of it, Goring is up front alone. You could try and have a chance as Ryan Morley, I believe, has been black flagged. Car number 30, I think so, has been black flagged out of this race. As again, we see, I think, another car. There's repairs required for a driver, and that is Joshua Lindsay, I believe. So they should be coming into the pits and making a tour. But just about now, 15 minutes remaining in this race, and still we're unsure who's going to be the driver coming out on top.
Yeah, we certainly are, as of course David Wrench came out in that 9th place. I think that was also Adam Barron coming in to pit lane as well from 6th, same with Plastel too. So that was a little bit of a moment there for Cullen out of the loop. It'll be interesting to see what happens now in that battle at the front of the field, as we are now looking at Toby Andrews, just made his way up into 6th, and a little bit further back, it's David Wrench, who's now in 7th overall and in that pro category, just trying to hunt down Toby Andrews in front and just maybe try and manage his way through the traffic. But the good thing here, Zabby, the good thing for David Wrench is that he's come out traffic free. He's just in clean air and he can just push on into that gap until he catches up to the back of the number 11, which by that time, Toby could come into the pit lane and give him even more clean air. So for Jack Goring and Cullen, they've got to look out for this undercut here from Wrench.
Yeah, surely. I think that helps a lot, especially if you've got traffic clear ahead of you and you have not got to worry about that, because sometimes it could be a bit of a problem, especially if you're trying to fight at the front, especially the fight likes for the lead, as in the AM category it is Gladwell and Eastwood in the top two. So nice little fight between the top two in the amateur category as well. So this could get exciting. We might have a fight at the front in the pro category, but also in the amateur category, as Scott slightly runs a little bit wide. That's going to allow Gladwell to run away a little bit more and build that gap. So currently 6 tenths separating the two as well. So the top two in the amateur category going as well as somebody else has been black flagged, I believe. If we could get, as that is cleared, I believe, as currently 13 now, and there's a position switch, but that is Crop coming into the pits, has allowed one of those at the front lose out, as there's going to be a driver, and that's Ben in P3 in the AM category, and Darren being P12. And just the overtake has been done, and nicely done there from as well. We have Chris and Matthew fighting as well.
Yep, here we are then with Chris Boland and Matthew Forrest. Of course, for Chris, he was in that battle at the very lead at one stage, and then unfortunately made that contact with Goring, and that sent him down into this 9th place, in fact, and hasn't really made up too much progress since. David Wrench now, of course, up into that top 6. That's actually, I think, one of the Silver Machines making their way back out onto the road. As that's a move to the inside there from Boland onto Forrest. It was Brad Crop who's just made his way out of the pit lane in front of him, so he's going to be on cold sides. Boland round the outside there of Forrest. Is he going to be able to make his way through? Really squeezed wide by Forrest, and onto the grass goes number 86. Keeps his foot in it though, and wants to try and get this move done. He's determined to get by here onto the 78 machine, and for Forrest, just is able to hold on to position. Of course, Crop just in front, going wide through Brooklyn's, having to adjust to those colder front tyres, and then he could be a sitting duck for these two behind as well. So, as that's actually a poor exit for Forrest, and that's allowed Boland through on the inside through Woodcote, and he'll surely be able to just slot it in front before we get into Cop's corner. Yes, he will, and up into 8th place now for Chris Boland, as he will now try to hunt down Crop in front of him. A little bit further back, we have Pete Plasto, who is Adam Barron defending from Pete Plasto behind, and now the number 312 is going to look to try and get past the number 5. Of course, Plasto, having that spin on the opening lap, has recovered quite well, and if he can get a good run out of Chapel, which he has, he might be able to get this move done on the number 5.
There could be a chance. I think, are we going to have to watch out? Is there going to be a chance for him to make the move? Yes, there will be, as Pete is going to be on the inside into Stowe Corner. Who's going to be the driver that comes out on top? And that is going to be Pete in P10 there. Well, Matthew is in P9 up front, I believe, while Adam Barron has lost out to Pete Plasto in P10, sorry, there. And interestingly, I mean, surely it's still about just a little bit less than 11 minutes remaining, but drivers are going at it and definitely fancying their chances to have any opportunity they could get, not only make an overtake, but possibly move forward, while we now will see Pete currently in P9 ahead with the driver ahead of him is Matthew Forrest around the outside. Is there going to be a chance for Pete to get through on Matthew there? Well, Pete will have the inside nearly for a moment. I thought he will, but he moves up just behind him on the back. As meanwhile at the front there, between these cars, there's a little bit of fight, and I think that is Boland fighting one of the cars there, while we see Pete and Matthew going to be fighting each other as well onto the Wellington straight, I believe this is, as there was a switch, or no, in fact, still Pete staying behind, so looking for chances, slightly moving out of the way, while I think Chris Boland, that is, leader of this little pack of cars here.
It certainly is. Was able to get past there on Crop and runs a little bit wide out of Luffield. And while all that was going on, Goring came into pit lane and has come out of in front of David Wrench by 2.5 seconds. So Goring, an expertly done pit stop, potentially, because he went so much longer, had to take less fuel, and that saved him some crucial time indeed, as Plasto now going to try and look to go around the outside through Maggots there on Forrest. Just isn't able to make his way through, but this then, of course, puts him into the clutches of Barron, who will try and find his way through as well. And also for Forrest, he's now starting to apply the pressure onto Brad Kropp just in front of him, but a poor exit out of Chapel now just gives Plasto the opportunity to look to the outside line into Stowe Corner. They're going to be side by side, heading up into one of the final braking zones on this circuit with 8 minutes and 55 left to go. It's Plasto now up into 8th place. Nicely done indeed, and now Baron got to try and get the move done as well. Maybe around the outside of Vale, but no, isn't close enough to Forest, who will just be able to slot in to that 9th place for now, as Ben Cullen has just come out of the pit lane, and he's also jumped David Wrench as well. So for David Wrench, coming in early, trying to undercut, it's not worked here, Zabby, and Cullen and Goring have come out quite a way ahead. Of course, about 1 second, and of course, we have a replay here of Gray spinning round. He's gone straight off at the exit of Chapel, and now as he rejoins the road, and he will spin round once again. And unfortunately there for Gray, a good race at the very beginning of things has certainly gone downhill. When it rains, it certainly pours. And also Ryan Worley having a mistake, and he's gone round on the exit of Luffield. So for the drivers in 5th and 6th in the AM category, both making very similar mistakes at different corners.
Yeah, finding it quite tricky there then. Kind of losing the cars on their own. Well, there's Brett Kropp in P8. He's got a car around the outside, and I think that's going to be beat out there. These guys are going side by side. Action at the bottom of this top 10 field, and it's all happening in these 7.5 minutes of remaining in this race now. I think it is still quite close between these drivers. We're talking about the top drivers. Wild is going to be Brett in P8. There's Pete ahead of everybody in this little battle, while Adam, I believe, at the back of this one, but the two cars in between, that is Brett Kropp and the car behind them, are going to be fighting each other out and about as well. So definitely now on the exit of those Meckett and Beckett and these couple of corners out of into Stowe Corner towards the end of this lap. So quite calm, I think. Again, we for a moment would have thought there's going to be a time where you might see these guys go side by side, but as soon as Pete got past the Brad there, and I think then there wasn't much fight between these drivers as it stands.
No, not much fight being able to put up there from Forrest as he tried to get past there onto Cropper and trying to follow Plastow through, but it just was not working, and was not able to find any sort of gap. Baron behind him has just dropped off as well, so Forrest has some clear opportunities at Kropp in front of him and can just now focus on the car in front for at least a couple of corners before Baron will potentially see himself catch back up after their little squabble. But for Forrest, he's now going to try and get this exit out of Aintree and use the slipstream down into Brooklands to get by on Kropp in front of him. Is he going to get close enough for that move to the inside? Now in the number 78 machine to the inside he goes on the 3-2-1, but just isn't able to find any way through, isn't able to go late enough on the brakes. And of course, this over 9th overall. It's still Mark Gouldwell leading the amateur class. He's the highest of those amateur drivers in 12th overall, the only driver in the top 16 from the AM category. And as we look a little bit further back, we got Blackwell and also Ethan Lee and Barris now all squabbling over 13th overall. And look, Barris, he's been tagged there by Ethan Lee, sent spinning round. And that has allowed Ryan Blackwell through as well. Darren Barris will not be very happy with that one. And he potentially might even fall behind Stuart Etok. But no, Stuart just nowhere near close enough. Actually, no, is near close enough and is able to get the drive out of Luffield and beat Barris to that 14th fastest, as Forrest is still putting Kropp under all sorts of pressure.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a nice one as well, upcoming in these upcoming laps. But it would be nice to see if we are to see any side-by-side action. So definitely all sorts of drivers. It's the kind of the case of drivers separated within a couple of trains of cars, but definitely going for fights. While Matthew now in P9, just behind Brett Kropp. Will there be a chance for Matthew to get past Brett there? This is going to be exciting. This is as close as it gets. Nearly goes onto the bumper in the back of Brett there. They're almost side by side heading in towards turn one, but he's slightly behind there. But he was pretty much onto the side of him, but not close enough or side by side for a chance for him to make a move. I think now the straight coming up ahead would certainly be a nice opportunity to take the slipstream and tow for Matthew there behind Krop to have a chance and possibly get closer on that straight if he could any. Otherwise, it's going to be into Brooklyn's into that left-hander, but I don't think he's going to be close enough just yet to be making a move. So maybe, just maybe, you know, not many cars ahead of them up the road quite close. So rather possibly making the decision of I want to be here, or pretty much we will be here, so possibly wait for a best opportunity and only then go for a move, not quite rush it, which could possibly ruin their chances or even be of even being in P9 that they currently are so far.
Yeah, it certainly is. And so far for the 16 runners that started for the pro category, 15 remain, and the same could be said as well for the amateur runner. Only one driver has unfortunately crashed, and that was Josh Lindsay, who is out of the race. In the amateur category, with Gladwell still leading the way over Eastwood by a whopping 15 seconds. Lovely stuff there from Gladwell. He's kept himself trouble-free, and he has just been pushing on in his own race and has been fighting against a majority of these pro runners. It's still Forrest versus Krop, though, for this 8th place as we're getting to those dying embers. I think 2 more laps in this race to go. Of course, these drivers are a little bit further back from the race leaders, so 2 more shall remain, and a poor exit there potentially could have just gave Forrest the opportunity to get past Krop, as Cullen has kept Wrench at a touching distance as well. He's kept him at an arm's length back, so he's not been able to pose any threats on this 2nd place. And for Jack Goring in the championship lead, that is certainly what he would want indeed. Of course, Goring has been lightning fast all for the past 3 rounds. And of course, with the likes of Fulks not attending the previous 2 races, and with the fact he's going to potentially even clinch this race victory, the championship lead will be well and truly in his grasp as we exit out of Luffield Corner. Of course, one more time after this, he has to head around this circuit, and he's got a nice 1 second margin here, Zabby, to Ben Cullen behind.
Yeah, he has got. I think he's gained quite a bit the way. Ben was slightly behind in their previous stint from the top 2, but for a moment after David Wrench came into the pits, they got quite closer, but then again, Ben slightly staying behind. But I think in terms of Ben, let's say, you know, he's gained up on David Wrench. So as far as positions and, points are concerned, he'd be quite happy and satisfied with that 2nd place for sure. As for him, I mean, with David coming in early for a undercut, as we talked about earlier, he didn't have much traffic around him. So we'd have thought maybe he's going to be gaining quite a bit or out running, let's say, undercutting these guys, but that wasn't the case. So now with only a minute remaining in this race, pretty much should be the final couple of laps for our race leader. He's still going to have to stay focused, high on concentration to make his way around the circuit one more time and come up as the victorious here in this one, as Will Folks has been missing from the last 2 rounds. That is definitely is going to be a plus for the likes of Jack Goring, David Wrench and Ben Cullen gaining these points, and, you know, Will Folks missing out on those could possibly, maybe, it might not be a lot now, but as if it comes to the end of the championship, it could be a thought in the mind that had I been there, there would have been a different scenario in the championship standings.
Yeah, certainly could have done. As Plasto's actually been able to make his way past there on Bone, and of course a little bit further back is still that Krop and Forest battle. This is over 6th and 7th respectively for Plasto and Boland. So who is going to get this top 6 spot? Is it going to be Pete Plastow, or is it going to be Chris Boland, the 86 versus the 3-1-2? To the inside, Boland looks as Plastow goes a little bit wider on the entry into Brooklands. Just no move being made there as he's hot onto the brakes into Luffield. Of course, on the final lap, this is your last opportunity to try and get any overtake done. And as we now head through Woodcote Corner and up now to Ben Cullen versus Jack Goring. As Ben Cullen, I said it was a healthy margin for Jack Goring. Ben has really closed down this gap, so it might not be over for Jack Goring, the championship leader. He has 2 more attacking opportunities to defend from. It's half a second between the pair, and I think Goring should just be able to hold on to this one. But look at the rates of knots that Cullen is gaining down that hanger straight. It's late onto the brakes into Stowe, but Goring is just holding firm, and it will not be anywhere near close enough for Cullen to go for a lunge into the Vale chicane. And at the front of this pack, at the front of this battle, it is Jack Goring who'll make his way through Vale. It was a tricky start, but he certainly delivered under the pressure. He made his way back through the field, and he'll come across the line to win the first endurance race of the season. He wins here in Silverstone. Goring with a masterclass of strategy and driving to take the victory from Cullen, Wrench, Pauly, Stevens. Will it be Plastow or will it be Boland? I think it will be Plastow who takes that one in that number 312 machine in 6th place. And then in the amateur category as well, this man has kept himself truly out of trouble and has shown all these amateur compatriots how to drive this thing around Silverstone. It will be Mark Goldwell who will take the amateur class race victory in what has been a dominant drive in that category and beat some of the pro drivers as well. A big congratulations to the number 80 driver as he takes as well deserved race victory in the amateur race, and of course well far clear of fellow rival Scott Eastwood, as we're now making our way across the line with a majority of these drivers are now through this final chicane. We are on board with the number 89 machine. Through the final corner we go. What's this? Of course, a very nice race from everybody throughout the field who was able to finish the race. And even if you weren't, at least you started a couple of the laps. But of course, here's Zabby. It's Goring and Gladwell who win their respective categories. For Gladwell, it was domination, and for Goring, it was a little bit more tricky, but he drove well under pressure.
He definitely did. I think Gladwell did an absolute amazing job. I think fighting in, but especially some of those pro cars, has to be an excellent, excellent drive. And also not to forget Goring, who had quite a shaky start, nearly fall outside the top 3. I believe P4 he was into turn 1, I think so, after losing out on that start. But despite that, coming out on top and coming up as victorious, definitely, I think that was a brilliant drive from them as well.
Yeah, it certainly was indeed. But here is the results for this evening's race. Then this is, of course, the pro results. It was Goring from Cullen. 2 tenths separated the pair at the end after 40 minutes. Then it was Wrench, Pauly, Stevens, Plastow, Boland, Forrest, Crop, and Barron, who rounded out the top 10, with Forrest actually able to get past Brad Crop in the end of that race. And then the remainder of that pro category, it was Andrews who picked up an 11th place. Disappointing result after a good qualifying. It was Blackwell, Lee, Berris, Etok, and Slater, who unfortunately did not finish the race and was 16 laps down. Now, in the amateur class, of course, it was that Mark Gladwell victory by 32 seconds over Scott Eastwood in second. A dominant victory from the number 80. Then it was Weston, Worley, Gray, Scott, Ledoux, and Lindsay, who of course was our other retirement from the race. A very, very strong showing from all the drivers here this evening, and especially in the respective categories for Goldwell and Goring. And the overall results showed, of course, Goring, Cullen, Wrench, Pauly, Stevens, Plastow, Boland, Forrest, Crop, and Barron. The top 10 do remain the same. And then a little bit further back, it was Andrews from Gladwell who finished 12th. I think that is a very solid performance, beating 4 pros over 40 minutes in a endurance event here at Silverstone. He could be very happy with that one. It was Blackwell, Lee, Berris, Etok, Eastwood, Weston, Worley, and Gray rounding out the top 20. But Zabby, I think that was a very, very strong performance from all the drivers here this evening, but especially for Goldwell, who even though he's in the AM category, over 40 minutes, you expect to see that divide. You expect to see the fastest AM driver be at the back of the pro field. He beat 4 of those pros and wasn't too far off the back of Andrews either. So a very strong result from the AM driver.
Yeah, definitely. I think more certainly it was a fantastic drive, to say the least. Him, although being in the amateur category, certainly drove quite well, and I think he really pretty much outclassed all the other amateur category drivers, and pretty much almost, he was fighting a couple of those pro drivers as well. So it's a nice one. I think also a announcement and certainly a statement to show what he can do, not only over a sprint but also in an endurance race as well, not to forget a longer race. So you're going to have to do a lot more in terms of thinking, strategy, and everything that through, and taking victory by such a margin in that has to be a brilliant race for sure.
Yeah, certainly will indeed. And of course we now have Ben Cullen waiting for an interview. Of course, finished second in that pro category. So, Sabi, shall we bring him in to have a word with him and see how he found that first endurance race of the season? Hello, Ben. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I got you.
Well, first of all, congratulations on that second place. Just talk us through things. How did you find that overall?
Well, Porsche Cup's always interesting. It's a car that's always on the edge. It's counterintuitive to how you want to be. In order to be quick in the car, you have to be slow in the car. So it's not like driving a GT3 or one of the prototype cars. You have to kind of take yourself away from that mindset. And then for the race today, yeah, starting P5 was beneficial. Now we're away from the tight, twisty circuits. I can stretch my legs a little bit more, a little bit better, a little bit more forgiving with this car. And then just sit and wait. I knew I didn't have the pace of Jack, in all honesty. So I just sat fuel saving, trying to take little fuel and trying to jump him in the stops. And save tyres for then to try and attack him at the end, hopefully watching him and David burning up their tyres. But it's not long enough. It's been a 45-minute race, might have had a last. Yeah,
of course, as you say, just didn't have the pace for Jack there. But near the end, you did get very close indeed. Of course, 2 tenths separating you as you got to the line. Just, was that a little bit annoying that there wasn't a bit more time to try a lunge, or was it just, we got the second place, I'm happy with that over the race distance?
Happy with the second place in any regards, because I've been told I'd get second place, take it. And I strategically held back some 1Xs to use them when I wanted to, especially towards the end, to allow me a bit more momentum to kind of gain, rather than getting punished.
That seems like a very good strategy that nearly worked off in the end. And talking about those track limits, qualifying, we saw a few drivers not be able to get lap times on the board until the midway point of the session. Just how difficult was it to set consecutive clean laps while pushing at that limit and making sure they were all staying valid?
Yeah, it is a challenge, especially with the Porsche Cup. It doesn't have the downforce as a GT3 car. So it's very easy to overstep the limits, and obviously the size and the shape of the car is very different to people driving GT3s or prototypes. So the 1Xs you can pick up through the Beckett's complex is very simple and very quick to rack up and easily do, and I think some people may have fallen foul of that in the race by getting DQ'd. But it's finding that knife edge of where you can and where you can't, and then learning the consistent line, and that's what guys that are well above me in the sim can do 100 times out of 100 times.
Yeah, it was a very difficult race on those track limits fronts around a circuit like Silverstone. But one last one from me before I pass you over to Zabi. Of course, next time out we head to Thruxton, back to the 20-minute sprint format. first of all, will you be racing? And then second of all, are you confident around Thruxton, or is it a bit of a bogey track for you?
I'm confident in terms of I'm confident that I'll be towards the front, but again, with this car, like trying to go through cops, it's going to be the same trying to go through the fast right at Thruxton. You get that wrong, you're going to be off into the grass, and that's going to be the difference of who can nail that line. Will be the difference in quality, and that'll be the difference in the race.
It certainly will be indeed. And over to you, Zoe. Do you have any questions for Ben?
Ben, first of all, congratulations for your second place, Ben. And I mean, we saw you gain that second place from David in that second stint. But before that, as you were running in P3, let's say if you were to still end up in P3, was there any plan to still go for that second place or have a chance? Or you thought, no, I might be slightly behind in terms of pace and I'm going to stay where I am?
No, I think the way it was playing out, obviously I'd seen Chris kind of in the P3 position beforehand when they were all battling, and I didn't want to get caught up in that and get caught up in somebody else's accident. So I was conscious to just stay far enough away that wasn't the going to be the case. But my plan there was to first stint try and go as long as I could and save the tyres. Second stint, that would be when I'd attack. So when I come out in P3, hopefully I'd be able to attack with them two there. Obviously, we managed to leapfrog David, so then it was just me and Jack, and I just didn't have enough time, and I made a couple of mistakes in the couple of laps before, which gave him 3 or 4 attempts.
Right. So, yeah, pretty much that's going to be the end, I guess, ladies and gentlemen, from Ben. Before we have our another driver from the top 3 into the comms box with us for interviews, and that should be Jack Goring.
Well done, Ben, and yeah, thank you for tonight's race, and yeah, enjoy that podium.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much for this.
Right then, as Zabi said, we will hear from race leader Jack Goring, so let's get him into the commentary box. Hello, Jack. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Yep.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the race victory. Just talk us through how things went. How did you find the race?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. Yeah, I think the talking point in the Discord chats, the track temps. I mean, that was hot. The car was sliding about everywhere, so keeping it on the track was a challenge in itself, to be fair. But no, the whole race planned out quite well. Had a couple of little setbacks like the start of the race, but yeah, no, good result in the end.
Yeah, talking about the start of the race, what actually happened there? Was it you just didn't react to the lights in time, or did you just not build up enough revs to get the car off the line?
It's a funny story. I had to jump up and go to the toilet after qualifying, and then as I had come back, I was like, I need to, because it's an endurance race, I was unticking the tyres and not focusing on the lights, and I didn't realise everyone had gridded, and I was like, oh, well, now I'm down to 4th, so I was like, well, there goes that pole position. Complete waste, but you know, it was alright.
Fair enough. So a little bit of a last-minute rush between qualifying and the race, but of course, with you dropping down to 4th, that did then bring you a little bit of entertainment in trying to make your way up through the field. Of course, Andrew spun off, putting you up into 3rd, but you seem to have quite an interesting battle, of course, with Boland and then with Cullen and Wrench. It was quite an entertaining race. How did you find being put under pressure by those 3 drivers?
Yeah, it was a good race. I knew I had the pace early on, so I was focusing on if I can get into the lead, set my pace, because I was sat on the back of Wrenchy at the start of the race, and I was like, I think I've got a bit more pace to give here. So I was like, right, I got past him, and then was like, right, I'll try and pull a gap. The problem I had was just the slipstream. I couldn't pull a gap because as long as you're within a second, the cars are just going to pull back up on you.
Yeah, that slipstream did seem super powerful indeed. Of course, we saw you and actually Wrench trade the places a few times. Was that really just down to how close he was on the exit of the corners and the slipstream, or was there a few moments where you had a small slide due to the track temps and unfortunately he was able to get back through?
Yeah, it was a mix of both of them. To be fair, the track temps, like we were all making like little mistakes, like running wide and stuff, and then yeah, I had Wrenchy on the back of me the whole time. So I was like, as we came round to through, I think it's coming into like club, and then you got the pit lane on the end on the right hand side. I faked going up into the pit lane, and Wrenchy followed it but committed to it. So that meant he got stuck behind cars further back, and I could really just use my clear air pace to like build that gap, which is what you saw at the end after the pit stops. That like 3 second gap that I managed to build up. So yeah, it was good little strategic race, and then yeah, Ben was quick at the end, so fair play to him.
Yeah, actually, just give me a nice transition into that next question I was going to ask. It was about that early pit stop from Wrench, and well, now I know that you somewhat baited him into the pit lane. Just was you, of course, you say you weren't worried because of the cars behind. Was it always the plan once you got into that lead to extend a little bit further than Wrench if you could and try and get that overcut?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was more like if I could try and just build that gap to break the slipstream, because I knew I had the pace on my own. Because like when I was on the back of people, I was just like constantly like getting slowed down on apexes. So that's like the calling sign that you sort of need to get past and make a move. But yeah, the slipstream around here is so strong that trying to like creep that lead out normally is almost impossible. So yeah, that's why I tried the little pit lane fake to build a bit of gap between me and Wrenchy. But yeah, it was good.
It seemed like a very fun battle indeed. And of course, at the end of the race as well, Cullen got really close to the back of you on that final lap. He said he saved up a few of those track limit warnings at full disposal in the final few laps. Were you quite comfortable with the 1Xs, or were you on the limit of a black flag?
Yeah, no, I've got the results in front of me actually, and I was only on 6 incidents, so I was on the least in the top 10. So I was quite comfortable, and the bit I was struggling with was fuel at the end, because I unticked the auto fuel in the mad rush at the start. So I literally was coming up to the line, and I had like hardly any fuel left in the car. So my last lap was like balancing, trying to not let Ben by, but yeah, try and make it to the finish line.
Certainly did in the end. And just a couple more from me. Of course, we head to Thruxton next time out, back to that sprint format. Are you confident around there, and will you be racing next time out?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Thruxton. Yeah, I'll definitely be racing that one this weekend. I'll be busy racing Armed Forces Karting Championship, so going to have a bit less practice than what I did for this one. So it'll be interesting to see. But I do like Thruxton as a track, so should be a good weekend.
Yeah, should be indeed, and good luck on your karting race. Hopefully, you do just as well as you did here and take the victory. But Zabby, over to you. Do you have any questions for our race winner?
Not much. I mean, just a huge congratulations to Jack for that victory, and I'm definitely moving forward, especially quite excited to see along with you and David throughout the season with how good is that rivalry gonna be, and how you're looking into that, especially into fighting David throughout the season.
Yeah, obviously you've always got the championship picture, haven't you? But for the minute, like early few rounds, I'm just focusing on getting points in the bag. Obviously the race wins do help, but as long as I can just keep sealing away points, I won't bother looking at the championship too much until we get to like the last 2 or 3 rounds. So yeah, no, I'm quite happy with how it's going so far.
All right, then.
Yeah.
Interesting. So pretty much you're saying that currently just score points, go race to race, and then see how it pans out, and only focus or look at the championship at the very end.
Yeah, pretty much. Just gather the points. It's obviously a long championship, although it's every week. But it's definitely for the minute. First half of a championship, you can't stress about the end of it too much. So there'll be people coming and going. So it'll bounce about a bit, but yeah, no, it should be good.
Yeah,
Right,
certainly
once
should.
again. Yeah, sorry, good.
Oh, no, it's all right, Zabby. But yeah, it certainly should be a good end to the good start to the season and a good end to the first half. And yeah, hopefully we see you back in the commentary box next week.
Yeah, thank you guys. Cheers.
Congratulations. Well, Zabby, that is that for the driver interviews. Just before we head off, though, I'll quickly run you through the calendar for the rest of the season. Then me and Zabby will give our picks for driver of the day. But the remainder of the season, as of course I mentioned, it is Thruxton before we head to our next endurance race of Spa. Then the week after that, the 29th of April, we have a mystery round, which will be decided in the middle of the week between Spa and, of course, that race. It will be from the free content track, so no one would have to pay any extra, and that will be a sprint race before our next endurance race, where we return to Donington Park for another 40-minute round, and then it's 3 sprint races to end off the season. We head to Knock Hill, Alton Park, and then Brands Hatch to end off the season. But Zabby, now let's bring it to the all-important question: who is the driver of the day?
And we saw a couple of good drives, didn't we? Especially from the leaders of both classes. I mean, you could vote out for Jack. You know, he drove brilliantly as well at the front of the pro category. But then for the EM, I think Gladwell drove fantastic as well. There are obviously drivers and fights in between the races, but something that stands out has to be the 2 category winners up at the top.
Yeah, and if I have to say my pick, I have to actually really give it to Gladwell there. He drove so well. He made no mistakes. He just was in and amongst on that pro category, and he just had really good pace for the amateur class and dominated his own respective field. So for me, it is going to be Mark Gladwell as the driver of the day. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be all from us here this evening. Make sure you tune in next week, where we head to the fastest circuit in the UK. We head to Thruxton for what should be a very chaotic carnage fest and a very interesting race, where of course Slipstream will be king, and getting that fast right-hander right will be all important. But join us next week at 8 PM UK time or 9 PM European time, and we shall see you in the next one. Will Jack Goring continue his championship charge and extend it over David Wrench even more, or will Wrench find a way to fight back? That is going to be the question we'll find out next week, as we're about to end off the first half of the season in a couple of weeks' time. Stay safe, stay well, and we shall see you in the next one. Thank you all very much for watching, and bye-bye.